If you listened to my previous video, you would have known that I touched on the fact that I would talk about crime in Barbados today. However, I'm not going to touch on it talking about all the statistics. Yes, I may mention a few, but I want to delve into the why. We can only find out how we can fix things when we know our why. There's a reason for why things like this happen today. And I want to delve into that by going backwards a bit. So I'm Xannah Moniq. I'm the creator of Bajans, and this is Let We Call It We Baj Story. Let me talk about the why of crime in Barbados. Before we talk about the why, I want to, as I said, touch on statistics a tiny little bit. 20 years of statistics, in fact. Well, roughly speaking, because it kind of sparse-ish, but let me talk a little bit. If you see me looking down here, because I got my notes here, so please forgive me. In the early 2000s, Barbados experienced relatively low crime rates, especially in comparison to the rest of the Caribbean. And when I talk about crime, I'm being more holistic, but I'm going to get into a particular set of crime in a minute. However, as we veered into the middle to late 2000s, things began to fluctuate a little bit. Property crime began to surge. I don't know, roughly 2007 or so. Our family was hit with a break-in. Thankfully, when everyone was out and someone that was scoping our home broke in. But one thing I can tell you is that when a neighbor of mine managed to contact me and tell me, please get home, someone broke into the house, and I went back, the whole neighborhood was around trying to look for these people. They did not let up. It was so good to feel that sense of camaraderie. Unfortunately, I don't know if it is around as much today. You can let me know in the comment section. But yeah, back in that time, it was terrible going through what we went through, but it was good to see how a neighborhood came together to actually support. Before I get into all the statistics and things, please know that they're all cited. You will see some stuff here and possibly in the comment section so that you can research in your own time. Unfortunately, there was a high of this in 2006. However, it did lower. And then unfortunately, just before COVID, everything just went a bit haywire again. And now we are at unprecedented rates in this horrible crime. Not that all crime isn't horrible, but you know what I mean. 2019 recorded a rate of 48 to 49 MDers, which was an unprecedented high since the 20-somethings after 2006. So it's important to note that that was for the entire year. Take note of that. While the pandemic was surging, numbers started to drop with 42 in 2020, and then in 2021 and 2022, there was 32 and then up to 43 again, respectively. However, in 2023, there were half the amount of MDers than in 2022. Way less than what was seen in 2019 for the entire year. That was literally the lowest in such a long time. However, that was not to last. In 2024, for the entire year, there were 50 MDers. 50. A lot of gang and pow-pow violence, unfortunately. Already in 2025, we have recorded 30 MDers for the year. And I'm afraid to tell you the projected total for the entire year. But I guess you can see where the trend is going if we don't do something, if things aren't stopped. The majority of the crimes have ended up to be pow-pow violence, and there has been a 41% increase of robberies and assaults. There has also been a property crime surge of up to 67%. Like, what on earth are certain people doing, and what are the authorities doing? But I think even more so, we need to know, why on earth is this happening? So let's talk about urban displacement and neglect for a minute, right? Post-independence, you had a lot of people from the rural environments moving down to the city in order to create a better life for themselves and get better jobs and things like that. However, what would happen is that government at that time, the planning could not keep up with the influx of people moving. You ended up with low income housing projects, and with more people coming in, then you found that there were fewer jobs available, and also not enough recreation, because that is important for development. So you had areas, and you would know these well, like the Pine, Silver Hill, New Orleans, so many others out there. Put them in the comment section if you know. Becoming isolated socially and economically, because then people know these areas, you know, when they think of these areas, they think of certain things. What do you think? After a while, then you had the block, right? Because that came out of this movement and having then lack of jobs, lack of proper recreation, and lack of nice housing. Then even though you would have people coming on the block after work on the evening under the street light to play a game of worry or whatever, you would have people being on the block as well to survive. And sometimes criminal enterprise would happen there. Am I right in saying that most things about Barbados is all about service? We still run on this service model, you know, the service model that came from our past. You have tourism, finance, even offshore ventures. And sometimes even these sectors benefit some people, others are not, do not get the beneficial effects of it, like poor Bajan youth. Sometimes it's about their education, if they know certain people or don't, and how they look and all of that. All of that comes into play. Or if they come from certain areas as well. Some people tend to feel as if they work slave wages or slave hours. You know what I mean, right? When you feel as if you're working and working and working, and all you can do is go back to sleep, get up, go back to work, and then you're not working for much as well. And that in turn then leads to criminal activity because people are trying to survive. You have like the UGs and the theft and all sorts of other things like that. And because of this, in turn, then unfortunately some youth tend to see crime as the only way to financial success. They feel that they can finally have status and respect. The same things that would have been denied from their ancestors. I really think that we need to focus on our history. Some of us are so quick to move away from it, and then we don't have respect for our culture, even though I have found when I look back at how we were celebrating emancipation and crop over, and by extension Kadooment and things, I really saw that cultural element was trying to come back, even though I have found that some things have been cut out of crop over. But I will talk in a different, let we call it, we base story episode about the history of crop over and all of that. So stay tuned for that. In order to do that, you gotta subscribe. So yeah, the older folk pass away, right? And then you find that some people, especially in this generation, like Generation Z and stuff, are not quick to try to learn about how things were done in the past, how things were made, what the culture was like, the foods that were, you know, different things like that. And then you find that certain things just pass away. Yes, there were some things that were not the greatest, as we have talked about just now. But there's some things that were really good, like our morals, our sense of community, coming together and helping each other and things. We did that to protect each other. And some of those things are not as strong with our young people today. They feel a bit disconnected from values, from guidance, and history. We all know as well that the education that we had from all the way back was colonial, which continued until today, which put down our African heritage and taught us what was right, which necessarily wasn't the right thing. Barbados was taught to be British back in my mother's time and before. You weren't taught much about slavery. You weren't taught much about where our people came from, but we were taught about the wars of England. I remember being in secondary school and bringing home my history books. I loved history, as you'll realize, and telling my mom about like the Arawaks and the Caribs, things that they did not even know about as much, or if at all, and talking more about, slavery and things. And it's such a shame, but we were conditioned to think a certain way, and that holds true to today. We were taught that other countries were better. Britain was better. It was better to be British pre-independence, and being lighter skinned was better. We still have a bit of that. We need to get away from that. We were taught all the wrong things by the wrong people. This has left us with a generation now who doesn't really know who they are. They would like to believe that, or maybe they don't believe it, but I don't think they are as in tune with who they really are and where they come from. We have a set of people who are living in that void, and they seek gangs then for some sense of community. And then you have these imported ideals as well, which may not be the best for us. You also even have like hyper masculinity, like you're trying to prove yourself, and beating up people and all that is the best way to be, when in fact it's not. So let us go back a tiny little bit and talk about the policing in Barbados, right? When it comes to the history of it, did you realize that the first police were actually palm colored? So we're talking about after emancipation, and the modern police forces were made to replace militias and slave patrols. However, that didn't change much of anything because, as I said, they were palm colored, and there were constables that looked like us who were at the bottom. The institution of policing was not made to police and protect people, but actually to protect palm-colored property owners and maintain the plantation peace. So it was basically about protecting the property of those who were palm-colored. These early police were also used to arrest people that looked like us for vagrancy, the same vagrancy we were talking about earlier in the video, and the loitering, idleness, things of that nature. And you never believe this. They were also used to arrest people that look I can't even make this up, but they were also used to arrest people who were working for too high wages. They were used to arrest people that were working for too high wages. Stop right there, because I can get into it more. You hold on. So you got to remember that after emancipation, people that looked like us had no land or property, anything to call their own. So they had to end up going back to the same places that would have enslaved them. And that's where that situation came in, because the planters panicked about folks just generally wanting better conditions, a better situation for themselves after emancipation, and i.e. a better wage. They started to make laws to dumb that down a little bit. The planters and the colonial government got together to decide what a reasonable wage was for us. If you demanded that you wanted a higher wage, you were labeled as disruptive and then arrested. They even had put in their own documents excessive wage demands. Laborers who then tried to move or travel or change their job were labeled as vagrants, and for breaking the contracts, which in turn would land them in prison. If you didn't work for these people under their requirements, you were then labeled a criminal. See how the circle just goes round and round? The constables who looked like us were recruited from very poor communities to control their community, which then led to internalized bias. It's almost like the overseer that was put in place that looks like us back on the plantation to then snitch on us. These people did the same. That in turn led to the bias, brutality, not trusting each other. Thankfully, the Barbados police force is not like that today, but there are still remnants of that original policing model in place, which then causes people to not trust and instead to fear the police. So what do you think? You think that crime in Barbados is a now problem? Or it's a problem from all the way back? Do you think that the history and discovering the why is important in order to find some sort of a solution? Do you think the solution will be a fly-by-night thing, or do you think it's going to take time to build to the society that we want, even better than when we thought our society was safe?